Today on the Frontline Health podcast.
We know that sugar is really the new smoking, and it is in everything that we eat. They add sugar to our barbecue sauce. They add sugar to our fruit juices, to bread, to just about everything. And I think it's important to recognize that the American Heart Association recommends for men to get no more than 36 grams of sugar a day. 36 milligrams of sugar a day. And one can of Coke actually has 39, or soda actually has 39 to 45 milligrams of sugar in it by itself. That doesn't include everything else that we eat. So it is a huge, huge issue that we need to really start going back to what we've talked about all along, really start taking ownership and reading the labels and seeing how much sugar we're taking in, because there is a link between sugar and inflammation, and we know that that is the case.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Frontline Health podcast by Centurion, where we share health news, tips, and insights to help you elevate your health and your life. My name is Evan Patrick, and with me is our founder and CEO, Troy Duell. We're bringing you another round of health headline highlights from March.
How are you, Evan?
I'm doing well. How are you, Troy?
Good, man. You excited to start trekking through these health headline highlights?
I'm ready to go for a long trek and navigate the forest of all that there is in health news from the month of March.
Anytime you can get a good trek in is always good, I think.
I would agree.
All right. Well, let's jump right into these health headlines. And I thought this was an interesting one as I was combing through things. It says, "The Paper Advantage, Why Reading Print is Better for Your Brain." The subtitle is, "Neuroscience Shows That How We Read, Not Just What We Read, May Fundamentally Alter Our Cognitive Abilities." I thought this was incredible. To kind of summarize the article, it said it goes through the neuroscience, and they researched and highlighted that reading books actually enhanced our reading comprehension. It enhanced our attention and our cognitive development more effectively than digital reading. So no more reading off of a computer, no more reading off of an iPad or a Kindle or anything like that. And they actually linked that to better retention and brain connectivity. So really kind of amazing across the board, especially when you think about what we do with our modern education. Mm-hmm. Most educational opportunities that kids have are based off of computers only, and they're based off of iPads or laptops. So something to certainly think about, and I figured with your background in teaching, this might actually hit home for you.
Yeah, no, I can definitely speak to this not only as a teacher, but as a student. I mean, I completed most of my bachelor's degree on a computer with online courses. And there were those courses where the book was digital and it was on the screen versus the ones where they actually shipped books to me and I read the physical copies. And I can definitely say from my own personal experience, I felt like I retained a lot more from the physical books. I didn't know why. I didn't know that there was actually science to back this up, but it makes total sense to me. And definitely as a teacher who taught 9th and 10th graders about history, the computers and the screens for a variety of reasons, not just the scrolling or whatever there is that they can actually point to say these are the problems. It was clear that kids were not learning as much when we would read things on their computers, and they just have them in all their classes now, even though they're back in person.
Well, I think it's interesting. What I typically do is I'll underline things or I'll dog-ear pages so I can go back to it. But if I'm reading on a Kindle or a laptop or something else, you may be able to highlight it, but it doesn't seem to have that same sticking effect that dog-earing a page or underlining it or highlighting it does on a real sheet of paper. So I don't know what that means for our educational system and what we need to do, and trying to find ways to really bridge between the two, because we know that the future is going to be laptops. The future is going to be electronic, but how do we balance the two? And I think the article did a great job of kind of laying some of that stuff out.
Well, the crazy thing to me that I noticed in talking to veteran teachers when I was a teacher is that kids have sort of lost the ability to do things in handwriting.
That's
Like
so true.
handwriting has suffered tremendously. I can even remember a couple of years ago when I was administering the ACT and walking around this room full of 10th graders, helping them fill in bubbles on a Scantron and write their names. You have the boxes that you have to write the letters in, and struggling to just get those letters on the Scantron inside of those tiny little boxes. But it's not their fault. It's
That's right.
because they are not used to doing things in a handwritten way.
Well, and I think we lose that ability for spatial reasoning that learning how to write and do those types of things really brings about for individuals. I know we've had several people who've come to work here in their mid-20s who never learned how to write in cursive. So they don't know how to do that. They don't have a signature. I actually bought a car for my daughter, and the guy who was giving us the title, they said, "You need to sign it." And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And he's a 29-year-old guy. He could not do a signature. It was all in print.
Yeah.
So I think that speaks to some of this too, because we've gotten, and understandably so, we've gotten so electronic focused, and we know that the future is going there, but we also have to understand that our brains need some of that spatial component and the ability and skill to take what's in our brain and put it to our hand and put it on a sheet of paper.
Yeah. Now, there's probably a lot you could say about public education in Alabama, but I learned to write cursive, and I'm 27 years old sitting here today.
Well done.
So maybe the outdated curriculums are actually good for something after all.
That is very true. Very true.
All right.
Well, what's our next headline?
Let's get to it. Health Secretary tells CEOs to remove artificial dyes from food. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. recently met with executives from PepsiCo and other companies. So to summarize this article, Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is pushing for major food companies to eliminate artificial dyes from their products, emphasizing consumer safety and regulatory oversight. While companies express a willingness to collaborate, Kennedy has signaled that the government may intervene if sufficient progress is not made. Troy, your thoughts on this?
I think it's actually a good step. We've talked earlier about food dyes in the past, and I think it is a huge, huge issue. And I think it's one of those issues that has long-lasting health consequences. So it's something we need to take hold of. And it'd be great if Pepsi, and I think there were a couple other companies in there that were involved, if they could take that and really be more consumer driven and understand what's best for us as opposed to necessarily what our taste may be from how it looks or anything like that. I think that would go a long way in dealing with this. But what were some of the things that they talked about the government doing in this article, if anything, that the government is currently doing to curb this issue with food dyes and other things?
So in some cases, this is being addressed at the state level. One example is California.
Okay.
They've already banned artificial dyes in school lunches, which that's one of the big things that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is talking about is making school lunches a lot healthier. And other states are moving towards similar restrictions. Also, the FDA and the HHS have been pushing for federal oversight on food additives, including revoking approval for certain dyes like red number 3.
Yeah, because that's the one that they actually, in January, went ahead and said it can't go in any more foods or anything like that. But isn't it true that it's like not till 2027 that actually takes place?
Right.
So it's still in our foods. So as a consumer, we need to be aware that, yes, it's been revoked. They're not allowed to do it anymore, but it could still roll into your foods until 2027.
Yeah, and this is interesting because I am generally against government oversight and overstepping its bounds. And, we've talked about issues with this, with the FDA and how much regulation they're actually able to do, the self-reporting that goes into these things. What are your thoughts just from the perspective of a health enthusiast and expert, but also as just sort of a business owner? Is the government going to be able to effectively accomplish what it wants to accomplish with this?
It's a great question, and I think ultimately, if the FDA is there as a mechanism to help each of us as consumers get healthy food, and healthier drugs, then this is actually the best step they could take in going towards that. So if you stop the source, which is if it's a food dye that's causing cancer, that's causing hyperactivity, that's causing all these other issues because of the food dye, then I think if consumers aren't stopping because they can't be educated, or we don't have sources for us to go to and find out what this stuff really is doing to us, then it's really up to the FDA to step in and do that kind of stuff. So in a way, I'm like you. I think less regulation for the most part is better, because most companies, if they're doing it right, they should be looking out for what's best for the individual.
Right.
Now, in this case, it doesn't look like that was the case, because you have these companies looking for cheaper alternatives to make their food better so they could market it, or make their food look better so they could market it. And that is an unfortunate piece of what we have to deal with.
Yeah.
And that's where the FDA should step in and have some issues with it. But then outside of that, if you have some healthy alternatives that you can put into a product that makes it look similar, I mean, Europe's doing it and Canada's doing it, so surely we could do it as the United States.
Yeah, and if I can nerd out for a little bit, as a history enthusiast, it really does remind me a lot of like the late 19th and early 20th centuries with the meatpacking industry. There have been times in our country's history before when the government has had to step in because there have been blatantly harmful practices. So that puts me at ease a little bit to be able to look back on times when even from the perspective of less regulation is better, there are just times when it's necessary for an authority to step in and put a stop to something.
Totally agree. And I think that's also the time that they're really fulfilling their mandate, which is how do you protect the individual consumer at the end. So our next headline, if you want to get to that, unless you had some other questions on that.
No, go right on ahead.
All right. So great headline. It says, well, not really a great headline, but we've talked about microplastics before, so it's one that kind of caught my eye as we were looking at it. Microplastics found in blood and organs are linked to multiple cancer risks. The summary of that article, it says that research highlights growing concerns over microplastic contamination in the human body, linking it to DNA damage and increased cancer risks. Experts warn that exposure through food, water, air, and household products may actually contribute to long-term health issues, and they actually urged consumers to reduce plastic use. So again, it kind of goes back to our microplastic talk earlier, or podcast earlier. I mean, plastics are everywhere. We don't even think about it anymore. We're drinking out of plastic water bottles. We're storing our food in plastic. We're eating off of plastic plates. And they're saying that all these microplastics from those pieces are actually getting into our waters, they're getting into our food, and then there are some cases where these off-gassings that they talk about. So if you've got a rug that's brand new and it's got some synthetic materials in there that are plastic, and they get puffed up in the air and then you breathe it in, that's another way that we're getting those microplastics in our body.
Yeah, I don't want to run this into the ground, but I would encourage anybody who's listening to this episode who hasn't listened to our microplastics episode just a few weeks ago to go back and listen to that episode to just dig in a little deeper into some of those things you just mentioned, Troy, that it's not just in our food or food storage containers, it's in our water supply, it's in our air, and we need to be doing the things that we can do to make sure our water is purified, our air is purified, and that we're taking in less of these microplastics. So definitely would recommend anybody who hasn't listened to that episode to go back and listen to it. Our next health headline highlight for the month of March: sugary drinks linked to an increase in oral cancer risk among women. New research. Risk is particularly pronounced among non-smokers and light drinkers. A new study finds that women who consume at least one sugary drink daily face nearly 5 times the risk of developing oral cavity cancer, even if they do not smoke or drink alcohol. Researchers suggest that high fructose corn syrup in these beverages may contribute to inflammation, gum disease, and insulin resistance, which are linked to cancer development. Public health experts recommend reducing added sugar intake and opting for natural sweeteners to mitigate the risks. Is this telling us that drinking a Dr. Pepper or a Coca-Cola a day could potentially be as harmful as doing things like smoking or over-consuming alcohol?
It definitely is, and I think it goes back to some of our podcast on sugar itself. We know that sugar is really the new smoking, and it is in everything that we eat. They add sugar to our barbecue sauce. They add sugar to our fruit juices, to bread, to just about everything. And I think it's important to recognize that the American Heart Association recommends for men to get no more than 36 grams of sugar a day. 36 milligrams of sugar a day. And one can of Coke actually has 39, or soda actually has 39 to 45 milligrams of sugar in it by itself. That doesn't include everything else that we eat. So it is a huge, huge issue that we need to really start going back to what we've talked about all along, really start taking ownership and reading the labels and seeing how much sugar we're taking in, because there is a link between sugar and inflammation, and we know that that is the case. So did that article have any suggestions about ways to minimize that risk?
Absolutely. So experts are suggesting that reducing sugar consumption and replacing HFCS with natural alternatives like stevia, it's my favorite coffee sweetener, monk fruit, or whole fruits, that can help lower the cancer risk using those natural sweeteners instead of sugars. I will say you have to be careful not to opt for those diet sodas if that's what your guilty pleasure is. As we've discussed on recent episodes as well, those can be almost just as harmful for diabetics and people with other health conditions.
Absolutely, and I think one thing that they did not mention was honey. We know that honey can be a great alternative because it not only comes with that the sugar and the sweetness of it, but it comes with other health benefits like reducing allergies and other things. So if you can get by with using honey as your sweetener, that may be one of the best ways to go about it.
Absolutely. And something that jumped out to me from this article too, talking about the proclivity of high fructose corn syrup, sort of, I guess you could say, a red pill moment for me, and just realizing how big of a problem that is. I had never been to Nebraska before my brother's wedding about 2 years ago. And, we're driving through all these Nebraska cornfields, just looking at them, Nebraska and the Midwest is known for their corn.
I mean, they are the Nebraska corn huskers. So
exactly.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Right. And I'm thinking this whole time, wow, that's a lot of corn just like for people to eat. And then my brother's wife informed us that corn is not for eating. It's not for just picking off the cob. It's for producing high fructose corn syrup.
That's right.
And a lot of that's for animal feed and things of that nature. But it's a lot. There's definitely a lot of high fructose corn syrup that is going into our foods.
If you start reading those labels and you look at the back of everything that you're eating, more than likely, if you take 10 things off your shelf, 7 to 8 of them will have high fructose corn syrup in them. So yeah, it's everywhere. And not to beat a dead horse, but our final headline for this month is sugary drinks linked to millions of new diabetes and heart disease cases. And the subheadline to that was that developing nations bear the brunt of the sugary drink health crisis, according to new research. And to summarize it, it says a study from Tufts University found that sugary drinks contribute significantly to type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease, particularly in developing nations where marketing and weak regulations have driven some high consumption and demand. They tracked people from 1990 to 2020 and found that those beverages caused 5% of diabetes deaths and 2% of heart disease deaths worldwide.
Wow.
And Latin America and the Caribbean, which you just came back from, faced really the highest burden of them all. And researchers were really, in this article, trying to warn that, hey, we need some serious health intervention here, and understand that this health crisis is going to continue to expand as these sugary drinks continue to be marketed and pushed worldwide. So it's not just a U.S. thing, which it is definitely bad in the U.S. with sugary drinks, but it is turning into a worldwide epidemic, because they taste good and we get hooked. And that's ultimately what this is all about.
So you mentioned that Latin America and the Caribbean and really just some other developing countries in general are the hardest impacted by this. Do you have any theories as to why that's the case?
I don't, other than I think maybe that's where the marketing is the best and the easiest. And really, Latin America and the Caribbean are closest to the States. And we've got our sugary drink crisis, and we've exported down to Latin America and the Caribbean, and they're probably the closest to us. Therefore, they're going to be the most likely to have those drinks, because if we vacation in those areas or we travel in those areas, we're bringing some of our desires and wants, and they're trying to help keep people and draw people back by giving them the things that they want, and then they start drinking it, and next thing you know, everybody's hooked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we have covered a lot of ground in this episode. We have talked about everything from how reading from physical books as opposed to computers can help you learn things better and be better for your neurological health.
Yes.
We've talked about microplastics. We've talked about the harmful effects of added sugars. Is there any nuggets that you just want to pull out of this before we sign off to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I think the big thing that we've gone back to is we should always take ownership of our health. And that starts with even the reading piece and understanding that, hey, there's a component that I need to be reading more and looking at things, because there is that development of the neurological that we need to continue down that path. And then taking ownership of our labels with sugar intake, for sure. We've got to limit that. And then, of course, the microplastics and even the food dyes, and really understanding that there are things out there that we can control that hopefully will help us live healthier, better lives, and we can truly steward our health in a good fashion, that we can live a good life, a long life, and a productive life by doing just some of these small things.
Absolutely. That's great. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of the Frontline Health podcast by Centurion. As always, we encourage you to go out and take ownership of your health today, because you are your best health advocate. If you enjoyed what you heard today on the podcast, please consider subscribing and leaving us a review. We would love to hear your comments or questions about anything we've talked about on the show. For more health news, tips, and insights, follow us at Centurion Health on Instagram, Facebook, X, and YouTube. And for safe, effective, and affordable healthcare products made in the USA to help you elevate your health and life, visit Centurion.health. We look forward to you joining us next time on the Frontline Health podcast by Centurion.